Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we've had a bit of a meeting and we've decided there's going to be a few changes to the Comedy Slab podcast.
Are we getting rid of you?
I was doing my best, Colin. What's his name? Crompton.
Not Firth.
God, where do you remember those names? Where do those names come from in the back? I say to my wife, that's why I'm so thick and can't remember anything. It's because my head is just crammed full of stuff from the 70s that is just a waste of time.
It's flashing up disc overload, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, yes. 2 pints of Ansel's Bitter, please. And remember Tartan? Was it Tartan Bitter? Was another one. But,
that was close. Well, if we're going to go down that route, you've got your Watney's Roll Out the Barrel.
Watney's, yeah.
Works wonders.
I had a Watney's keyring, which was like a little red barrel. How cool was that?
I think I had one, or my grandfather had one because he ran an off license. I come from a long line of.
I thought you ran off with a license. your great grandfather. Anyway, sorry, we're digressing already before we've even started. Welcome to the Comedy Slab podcast. I'm Shane O'Connor. He's Adrian Lacey. If you've not caught up with the Comedy Slab podcast before, this is probably a very fortuitous time for you to join us, because we're the podcast equivalent of moving the furniture around. I think is
on the Titanic.
Probably on the Titanic. I think it's fair to say. Let me give you an idea of what we do. Each week we listen to a comedy program. One week I choose one. The other week, the alternate week, Adrian will choose one to watch or listen to. We have a little chat about those comedy programs. Normally, we would play some clips in those, but we've decided to get rid of that bit, which was the bit where we used to sit back and put our feet up as well and have a rest. So we're going to make the podcast a little bit snappy, a little bit shorter. We're trying to make a few changes, aren't we? Because we're thinking about it. We've done 100 episodes, and we kind of think now is maybe the time to give it a zhuzh.
Zhuzh can be my favourite spelling out of the three is ZHUZH. That's easy to remember. Or there is also what looks like Zoosh, ZHOOSH, or finally ZHUSH. Take your pick. Freddie Parrotface. We're back to your favourite decade.
I've just flubbed all down my shirt with that last one. Thanks for that. Anyway, so the changes will be apparent as we go along, won't they? But because we'll just leave gaps where the old things used to be.
Well, we're trying to work out what we're doing instead of.
And and there'll be new things that come along. And if there's anything, in fact, it was Adrian, wasn't it, who said he liked the news about what was coming up, what was happening in the industry, what was getting a commission, what was coming back for another series, and all that kind of stuff. Which was one of the ones that we kind of joked about whether we were going to put it in or not. And I think that's probably something that I'd like to have a bash at. If is that something that you think is
absolutely, yeah.
viable?
Well, we speak during a time of lockdown, and of course there are big concerns about the future of live comedy. Because did you know, this doesn't seem at all fair. It's terribly snobby. It's all very well them saying there's £1 billion plus for the arts. Did you know, under government regs or definitions, comedy doesn't count as an art? Well, why is it not an art form as much as any other performing art?
When they say it's not under a category, it's unfair to ask you because you've only just said that it's not. But I always want to know, what's it under then? If it doesn't come under art, what is it? Science?
Well, I mean, look. I can't speak for you, but I think it's an art. So I'm not the best person to ask that because I disagree. No, the government doesn't seem to be formally recognised as something worthy of that funding. So there is on Twitter and I suppose elsewhere. Sorry, I will let you finish in a second.
No, go on.
We'll pick up. There's a hashtag Keep Comedy Live. Have I got that right? I would double check it. You say what you were going to say and I'll double check it.
I was going to say it doesn't really matter one way or the other anyway because all the comedians are at home making podcasts. So, can
we make it clear we don't see ourselves as comedians before we get done under trades descriptions.
No, I was complaining that they were taking our jobs, coming over here, taking our jobs, etc. I did want to mention, and it was Adrian who made me think about this, not this Adrian, but the other Adrian who is at the other end of the podcast listening to it.
Adrian Bailey, one of our regulars, bless
indeed.
him.
And I saw this and I thought of him and I thought of us at the same time. Do you remember the Cockfields that we slabbed some time ago?
Who could forget the Cockfields with their, I think, continuity error over their umbrellas? But never mind. That's probably not the best thing to remember, is it?
You see, I remember it for being Joe Wilkinson, Diane Morgan, Sue Johnson and Bobby Ball. You remember it for the umbrellas.
You're the superior artiste of the two of us. That's if we're artistes. Are you an artiste?
Everywhere we go, I can't go anywhere with him, and he goes, look at the umbrellas. I'm sure they moved then and they weren't in the last scene. They're making a series 2 of it, which I thought was quite interesting because it was only a three episode job. It wasn't. I watched all 3 parts of that. I quite liked it. You weren't so keen, were you? I can't remember.
No, but you were fairly cool at the time and you hadn't, I don't know if you'd seen all 3.
Maybe that's how I remember it more fondly. I don't know. Yeah,
I do have a feeling that you, or had you done a cheat and you confessed on the slab that you'd actually
watched all 3,
which you're not meant to do under regulations, which we haven't actually formalised. Anyway, that hashtag, by the way, I got completely wrong. Of course, it's hashtag Save Live Comedy, and a lot of comedians getting behind that, and comedy lovers. I shall be signing up.
It's not one of those phrases like love, life, love, live, life, laugh, whatever. What do the people have painted on their wall in
make love, not war.
In houses?
Oh no, that's going back.
Was it live, love, laugh? Is it something like that?
Dance as if no one's watching. I already do. You haven't seen me move yet.
I dance like that, and then pretty soon nobody is watching.
Please.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. No, the new Cockfield series is they're filming, I think.
All right, August. Socially distanced, no doubt.
No. They're filming in August. Well, they're planning to film in August, but they may change because of coronavirus. It says here. But yeah,
was that your tin leg?
That was my tin chair.
Oh right, okay.
So I wouldn't mind. I'm not really mad keen on Diane Morgan. But I thought she was quite good in that. I quite liked her. I saw her in a different light, which is always quite nice, isn't it, really? But yeah, so the oddball comedy set on the Isle of Wight, that's going to be coming back for a second series. If it's filming in August, tail end of the year, do you reckon it'll be out by Christmas, probably?
Well, it could be, provided there aren't extra production delays due to a certain nasty virus. Certainly, they could turn it around that quickly if they wanted to. And don't forget, of course, there is a shortage of material in what would normally be a full pipeline ongoing.
Yeah.
So maybe stuff will get more quickly to air. I don't know. It could.
Nothing worse than a full pipeline ongoing, is there? Though that's so. I was only saying that to the doctor in the week.
Yes. Never mind the laxatives. Moving swiftly on, should we tell the nice, patient listening audience what it is we're actually putting on the slab of comedy this week?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it was my choice, wasn't it? It was my round. So I went out and got us 2 pints of the Blagger's Guide, which I have in my collection. I have an extensive. In fact, if anybody wants to come up and have a look at my extensive collection, you're more than welcome.
I never get that invite extended to me.
They're right next door to my etchings, if you're interested.
I think I'll pass on that one, sir.
I've got it, which I think I got sort of at the time. I got to say, a big fan of David Quantick, who wrote and performed in this, and big fan of the Blagger's Guide. I think it's fair to say I did like the whole series. I found it quite interesting and entertaining and funny and sharp and witty, although it does have its pitfalls, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But the frustration for me with this thing is that you can't get it anywhere. The BBC, I mean, there's no, we don't even bother, do we now? They don't have it on their website. Well, they have a space for it on their website, and it says there are no episodes available. I actually tweeted the production company Unique Productions, who no longer exist. They were taken over by, is it Seven Media or something like that, I think?
Anyway, I can't keep up with Takeover. You know who was behind Unique originally?
Who was Unique? Remind me.
Noel Edmonds was the big boss years ago.
Was he?
It's been a while since he's been at the helm, but yeah.
Then, of course, there was that terrible incident where he shot Clive Anderson. Do you remember that with all the... Oh, no, hang on. That was
that Fry and Laurie? No.
That was
That's
Brass
last
Eye.
week. Brass Eye.
A couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
I'm shocked. I'm stunned.
He's never done it before.
No. How many times can you kill someone? Depends how specific they were being.
So I tweeted him in the week and said, "What's happening with the Blaggers?" I was going to send David Quantick a tweet as well, but I just ran out of time, never got round to it. So I'll have to send him one this week and say, "Look, any idea when is it ever going to be released on CD?" And because the copy I've got is not the best in the world. Because I probably recorded it off the radio at the time, I would have thought. But
yeah. Remind me which series and which episode. I did actually listen to the right one, but
this is it's series 2, episode 2, isn't it?
Oh, that sounds familiar. So that's 2006, according to my notes.
I think so. Yeah, it would be around that time. Yeah. And as it was a generic thing, the Blaggers Guide, and he used to do different either genres or bands. So this one is subtitled The Rolling Stones, Reggae, and The New Romantics. So kind of split into 3, isn't it? Really, although he went on to do other stuff. We've in our reshuffle as well. We've got rid of the
reshuffle.
We've got rid of in our cabinet reshuffle. We've got rid of the "What do you think of? You think I thought of it" section.
I don't think we should even refer to what we've got rid of.
Don't you?
It's like saying this is what we haven't got. Mind you, who's going to mourn the loss of second-guessing each other? Not us.
Well, do you know, it got to the stage where we didn't understand.
Well, you say that. Don't blame me for your shortcomings. You invented this wretched device.
And they could never remember how it worked. So
I say good riddance to it.
How do you say that you haven't got it without referring to the fact that you haven't got it?
Well, you've drawn attention to it now, so
damn.
You're stuffed.
Okay. So what didn't you think of it then?
I didn't think much of it, to be honest. And the way you always struggled every time, I thought, is he performing or is he genuinely... No, he's genuinely confused by his own item. It never got any better. I always thought, this is one of those things. It's like romance. I always hold out for something better, if you'll pardon the expression. And it, as it were, it never happens. But it's like that. Always, every week I thought, right, well, maybe Shane will understand it this week and he won't hesitate as he tries to ask the question.
I even got to the stage where I thought, shall I write it down? But then Frank, my son, took one of my crayons and I'd got nothing to write it down with. So so that was that as well. And we're also... Oh, no, I can't say that. I was going to say we're also going to get into something else, but I can't say that either.
Well, you might have to now. You've started, so you'll finish.
No, you carry on. I'm going to have a sip of purple.
You do that. Well, what to say except, Series 2, Episode 2. My first question would be about the Blagger's Guide. David Quantick has a great comedy heritage, comedy writing heritage particularly, but he does do, as in this instance, presentation of his own material. And I've heard him pop up on, for instance, Front Row, the artsy show on Radio 4, the weekday arts show. But is he trying to chew off too much in a half hour, which is never fully a half hour, whatever it comes in as, 27, 28 minutes. It's got 3 different huge topics. I know it's very tongue-in-cheek and he likes to keep it motoring, but Rolling Stones, reggae, and New Romantics, well, maybe the third of those I personally wouldn't want a whole half hour on, but the other 2 could fill half an hour. Well, certainly you could have 15 minutes or so of each of those. Was he trying to chew off more than he could eat? I've got that expression wrong, haven't I? Bite off more than he could chew in that time available. To me, and I don't know whether I'm reading too much into this, but I always kind of thought that
that was part of the joke in a way, because I mean, you couldn't really get 3 more disparate categories, could you?
No, not in the world of pop culture.
So you got the Rolling Stones, reggae, and New Romantics. I mean, even the order doesn't lend itself to a smooth transition. And I always kind of got I always thought that was part of the joke, because he always, that he did that a lot, and he put like kind of different sections in there that did jar and didn't really go together. But what it enables you to do, I suppose, is that, and don't forget this lasted, I think it was about 9 series of this, wasn't there, all told? Although
really,
wow. he did do a whole series on classical music, I think, the Blagger's Guide,
right? And
I think he did a whole series on jazz as well. So he kind of did do that, but within the Blagger's Guide, just the normal series, it was quite, as you say, quite fast paced. And you're not hammering home the joke then, are you? If you're like, you're 1 minute, you kind of, he did all the Rolling Stones jokes you'd want to do, and then moved on.
Yeah, I can see that argument. I mean, it did motor along, didn't it? Like a motoring thing.
Bit too fast at times, don't you think? It was a hard listen in terms of.
Yeah, you couldn't have it as background, but I mean, neither would you want to, really. I mean, comedy generally doesn't work as background. A burble of music can be background. Yeah, and to that extent, actually, I think it might have been slightly ahead of its time in the pace. I say that. I mean, you can draw obvious parallels if you want to go back to our favourite decade with a Kenny Everett type, where a sort of manic presentation. Did you hear any echoes of him, Mr. Everett?
No, well, do you know what? It's really weird because I didn't, but now you say I do. In terms of the production, I think that maybe that's what happens to people when you do comedy in a radio studio. It's because and I know. I mean, I used to work with a guy in Birmingham, and we used to do all kinds of silly skits and stuff like that. And that when I listen back or look back on stuff like that, I kind of think, oh yeah, that is a bit Kenny Everett. But it wasn't deliberate at the time. You know what I mean? You don't start out to go, oh, let's be like Everett. I think it's kind of. It's the mechanisms that you have at your fingertips, isn't it? Really, that make you, before you know it, you're doing song skits and all that kind of stuff, and funny little sketches and funny voices, and I think that's just what happens, because that's how you paint an audio picture with radio. I don't know,
but you can also be influenced subconsciously, can't you? And I guess. Sort of stuff comes out that you're not necessarily conscious of, but you've absorbed different styles. I mean, immediately I mentioned Kenny Everett. There have been parallels. I was just reading up on Steve Wright, because actually, here's the thing. Come with me on this journey. It's slightly perilous and tortuous, but fun with it, I think. David Quantick has his own website has got, or there is a subsection or something relating to him called Sonic Cathedrals. I think that's his personal website, David Quantick, whatever it is.
.com, yeah, I didn't see that. Yeah, go on.
And immediately that makes me think of, there used to be a skit on Steve Wright when he was on Radio 1. He's a Radio 2 man, has been for years now. But on Radio 1, there was a skit with a music journalist being sent up. I can't even remember if said journalist had a name, but it would have been a fictional character, but drawing on sort of sending up music journalists from whoever. I mean, there were references in this show to Julie Birchall, Tony Parsons, that sort of era NME. We'll come to that in a moment. Don't get distracted from my very long sentence.
Well, he worked there, didn't he?
Well, yeah. So that's an obvious thing. But there was a reference on the Steve Wright show. I will finish this thought if it kills me, and it might be my dying parting thought, so I might as well go out in style. And the reference was to Sonic Cathedrals, and then I suddenly thought, oh, was it David Quantick playing that character on Steve Wright, or has David Quantick picked up on it via Steve Wright, or does it have nothing to do with Steve Wright? it's a pretentious name for a loud band, or it's a pretentious way of trying to describe something in very floral language, which is actually just 4 sweaty blokes and a guitar and bass and drums. Anyway, when I was listening to Kenny Everett as a kid, my mum said, just in case we think Kenny Everett was the first to do this sort of chopped up sound, she'd go back a generation further. Who would she be referencing? Here's a test of your radio historical knowledge.
The Goons?
No, a guy called Jack Jackson.
Never heard of him.
Who was, I'm sure he's somewhere there on Tinternet now. And I've just been thinking, actually, because he had a house in the south of France, although he was a British broadcaster. And lo and behold, Everett bought a farm out in Wales with his then wife, or the woman who became his wife, the medium. Or was she extra large? No, she was a medium. She was into... Hey, thank you. Kindly leave the stage.
We were all trying to get to that joke first, weren't we?
We were. I just thought the sooner I could get there, I could wrong foot you.
I was going to say, we knew she was a medium. It said so in her underpants. Go on.
That's called having it both ways. You get your gag in anyway. But it's almost like Everett was working from the Jack Jackson playbook. But I'm sure there'll be some Jack Jackson on YouTube or something.
I'm going to have a look at that. What would say? I'll go on. I was going to say what kind of stuff. I'll look at. I'll Google it.
Well, but it was tape editing. I guess the pace will be slower because it's that would go back to the 50s, I would think, or early 60s. And you got Adrian Just followed in Everett's footsteps and so on.
I found it's really weird, isn't it? Because you think what you can do at home now, and for probably the last probably 5 years when I was subbing at the BBC, the equipment that I had at home was superior to the stuff that I had at work.
Yeah, bizarre, isn't it?
And I recently found a couple of jingles I've been doing. I've just been messing about. One in I don't know if I ever played it to you. One in the style of the Bee Gees. And the other one in the style of Queen,
right?
And it was just stuff I'd been mucking about on GarageBand. I think I've been doing and putting these things together, and they're all sort of vocally based. But I played them, and they kind of blew me away. And I thought, wow, I'm going to play them. I play them to the wife just to make sure, as a kind of reference point. She said, you can't believe the stuff that you do. But it's what you have access to now. I mean, the creativity should be far, in a way, anything Everett was doing, because you can do anything you want, can't you now? I mean, at the touch of a button. Whereas he was producing echo by running one tape into another, whereas now you just click a button and away you go, and you've got echo.
But there's a funny thing, isn't there? A sort of reverse cussedness effect, which is the flashier the technology, the less creativity, the thinking in the thinking.
Yeah. Now they talk about technology getting in the way. Which is the kind of the reverse of what you would think would happen. You would think the technology is the thing that aids you, really. I mean, if you've not heard the Blaggers Guide before, we're not doing a very good job at describing how it kind of all fits together. But it is very sort of sketchy, skit-based, isn't it, in that sense? I
was going to say, yeah. I mean, you laughed at the mere mention of Julie Burchill because there is a COD advert. Come on, share it with the audience, what the gag is. She comes on and she goes, hello, I'm Julie Burchill, and she's selling Burchill Insurance instead of Churchill Insurance. It's Burchill Insurance. Well, that's what the voiceover is saying. I think she's kind of denying that she's anything to do with it, but yes. Burchill!
That was it, Burchill instead of Churchill, yeah. Yeah. We don't see much of her now, do we? I don't know where she headed off to. Is she still working?
I haven't heard anything of her for years. She was not known for her shyness in the past. No. Shall we say, legally safely.
Should we say she was ubiquitous?
Yeah, and she was everywhere and all.
Oh, yeah, not half. The interesting thing as well I thought about this is that you mentioned the NME, Julie Burchill working for the NME. He worked for the NME, didn't he? When I say he, I mean David Quantick, yeah. And because the other thing as well, they were talking about Morrissey, and when he's talking about the reggae thing, what did he say? Something like he said, tell impress a racist or Morrissey with this Blagger's fact? Because there was a whole row, wasn't there, where the NME was calling Morrissey a racist.
Yeah, not the only people doing it. Did you think that was an interesting juxtaposition, do you mean?
Yeah, it was almost like you couldn't let it lie, could you? You couldn't let it go. You had to drag it up again in your sketch, sort of in that section. He was talking about reggae, of course, wasn't he?
Yes.
Did you enjoy it? I mean, as a
I did enjoy it. It's one of those things that it was obviously winning me over time. I didn't laugh immediately, but I was laughing more towards the middle part and towards the end. So that suggests I eventually I was seduced into it. So yeah, I'm not a natural David Quantick fan, but obviously, I mean, I love a lot of the stuff he's been associated with. I'm just reading up on it. We've talked before about jam and blue jam because, of course, we were talking about brass iron. He's all part of that axis. So loads of stuff that I've enjoyed that he's been involved in. So there's no question I am a Quantick fan when it comes to the writing.
And yet I think his finest hour as a writer, quite a prolonged hour in actual fact, was Harry Hill's TV burp.
Oh, right. I think you might have referenced him in that connection before, and I'd not picked up on it this time. But yeah, well, that's been very popular, hasn't it? And
it had until he wasn't associated with it anymore. It was quite an interesting thing. It reminded me very much of Robbie Williams working with Guy Chambers. And
oh yes, and then a divorce.
And then he wasn't working with Guy Chambers anymore, and Robbie Williams couldn't understand why his records weren't making the same impact that they used to, because he was still at the front of them and he couldn't understand it. And I think, with that, no disrespect to Harry, I've interviewed Harry a couple of times actually, but which I only realised going back through my archive. I also realised I interviewed Jimmy Savile.
Lovely. You mean you'd managed to forget that?
I had no recollection of interviewing Jimmy Savile. It was only a brief phone interview, but I had no recollection of interviewing him at all. It's quite.
Cynics would say that you'd, or Freudians might say that you'd just suppressed the memory because of the dark associations.
And why did I not remember I'd interviewed Harry Hill twice? Was it
no,
because I'm frightened by big collars?
There is no suggestion that Harry Hill has ever done anything wrong apart from crimes against suits.
Oh my God, I didn't mean anything like that. I mean,
no, for a moment I thought that's where you were going.
Yeah, and of course, an interesting new take we're doing on the podcast this week is that we get arrested just before we finish.
It's the weekly libel. This week I are mostly libeling.
Who are we going to libel this week?
This week
looks like Harry Hill.
Libel. I'm sure Kenny Everett, Beyond the Grave, could do us a jingle.
Yeah.
Libel.
I've got to mention as well, I forgot to say, when he was saying impress a racist or Morrissey, the next line was a white man doing an impression of Lee Scratch Perry.
Yes, interesting juxtaposition. Shows how one can be blind to one's own flaws, can't one?
Well,
or anything goes in the world of comedy, however you see it.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you were kind of won over at the end of it. I mean, as a whole, because I still think, although you were saying about the three parts, and you kind of think, well, why would you do it? Is that too much material, and does it work in that kind of way? I still think it hangs together quite well. I think he manages to hang the three, as I described them, disparate parts together over the half an hour. Do you think? Or?
Well, there was an odd gear change. I mean, there is going to be an odd gear change, as you've already pointed out, going from the Stones to reggae to New Romantics. Although, by the by, there is a Robbie Williams reference under New Romantics, but I've done enough oblique sort of connections, so I won't go down that particular route right now. But did you notice there's kind of blink and you miss it? And then I wasn't sure if I'd misheard it or almost like the gramophone had skipped a groove and missed a rotation. And we were on to the Wainwrights, Rufus and Martha. How did we get there from the Rolling Stones before going to reggae? Did I fall asleep at that point?
No, in fact, I think he's Rufus Wainwright is a regular target for David Quantick.
All right, they're not best of pals.
As I seem to remember, and I don't really know why. He's just not a fan. I mean, he's not a fan of a lot of people. I remember he once described Crowded House as being stuck in a lift with a couple of geography teachers and their guitar.
Right.
So
what's wrong with that? I'm saying, but I'm kind of with him on Rufus. I mean, I wouldn't want to be nasty because I know people I respect like Rufus Wainwright, but I think I had my ears open to Rufus by, or possibly, shall we say, delicately, the limitations of Rufus by when I was working on Radio 3. Just throw that in, and. I mean, some people might think, oh, this is a very snobby Radio 3 attitude. But actually, it was the studio manager, the sound technician, through the glass, who said, oh, it's a very self-regarding voice, isn't it? And it's a very flat delivery. I don't mean he's singing flat, but but not much life in the delivery. But, of course, if you're a Rufus Wainwright fan, you're going to say, well, cobblers to that, or where's that effect?
Or that's his thing.
Or that's his shtick, and you love it or hate it. Obviously, some people are in, some are in one camp and others in the other.
But in answer to your question, I'm not really quite sure. I had exactly the same moment where I thought, hang on, why are we giving the Wainwrights a kick in now? Because he was the family as well, wasn't it? It was like the Wainwright family kind of.
And what did it have to do either with the Rolling Stones or reggae? Which was either side of it.
But then I suppose you could say the same with the Julie Burchill thing, couldn't you? With it was like a little advert.
I suppose so. Yeah, they're mini sketches, but yes, that was in the form of a sort of send-up advert. Yeah, and Lewis Mcleod, one of the voiceovers. Did you notice?
Yeah, you see, that was the first time I ever became aware of him and his work, although, as I'm sure you're about to say, he went on to other things, and some would say greater things, didn't he?
Well, I assume you're thinking of Dead Ringers?
Dead Ringers. Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely. Thank you, Bill. Don't call us. And the interesting thing, have you ever heard his normal speaking voice and hence accent?
No.
He's Scottish. It's a very strong Scottish accent. But I don't think it necessarily follows, because he does a brilliant English accent. You couldn't really be in that world working in London a lot of the time and not do, obviously, a decent English accent. That's stating the bleeding obvious. But it comes as a bit of a shock. When you hear the texture of the voice, you think, oh, yeah, right, he does this, this and this. Yes, he does some Scottish characters, but it doesn't follow that. I don't know that it necessarily follows he automatically does them, and John Coleshaw does the English ones.
The thing that really impresses me, with, and particularly when you come to critique a show like this, with the whole of the Blagger's Guide, is the and I love this. I love this playing with the reality. So it's a mix of real things that happened that are bizarre and things that they're just it's just blatantly made up. I'll give you an example. In the Rolling Stones section, he's talking about the Rolling Stones, and he's talking about Brian Jones. One of the great things about Brian Jones, he said, was that he got a lovely mop of blonde hair, and he also had 5 children, who he urged his girlfriend all to call Brian.
Is there some truth in that?
It isn't. Yeah, it isn't true.
Did he have 5 children out of wedlock, or
he did? He did.
Illegitimate children. So that,
and apparently, true. And apparently, he urged his girlfriends to call all of them Julian.
It wouldn't be after Julian Lennon, would it? Or was the timing not right?
No. It was after Julian Cannonball Adderley, who's a sax player, apparently.
Right.
So he kind of... Now, I don't know whether he kind of misresearched that, or whether he kind of thought, well, I like that, that's a really good one, but I'm actually going to take it one step further, and I want them all to be called Brian after me. You know, this ultimately narcissistic act. Do you know what I mean? It's like, but he's kind of the way he gets reality, he gets the facts and puts them in a mixing bowl and just like mixes them all up. So you kind of think, well, I'm not really quite sure what the and it was quite great fun, kind of looking to see what you could find out and what you what you couldn't You couldn't. It's like when they did a sketch about when Keith and Mick, Keith Richard and Mick Jagger met each other, and that had got a large basis in fact that they met
at Dartford Station.
Yeah, with
That's
the records
true,
and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so that is true. I mean, it's been stated as true. I guess we'll never know, will we? Because we weren't there. But
well, speak for yourself. I had a copy of the New Seekers' Greatest Hits under my arm, which was amazing when you think it hadn't come out by then.
Yeah, and that was the reason that Mick threw you under the train, wasn't it? Of course.
It was, but I survived like a bad penny. I kept showing up.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of loving going on in this world.
Well, look, here's the thing. You've just illustrated my point, which is I've got to the point now where the only impersonation of Mick Jagger I will entertain, and which entertains me, is the one you've just impersonated, which is an impersonation of Phil Cornwall. Yeah. And so it's quite strange to hear. I don't know which of the voice artists, stroke actors, stroke impersonators was doing Mick, but it's probably unfair completely to judge it. It's a 2006 production. Although I think Phil Cornwall, that would probably predate that, wouldn't it? When was Silver Street? Which kind of cemented in the public mind. And of course, again, on Radio 1's on Steve Wright's show, Phil Cornwall used to do Mick Jagger.
I was going to say, was that Phil Cornwall on Steve Wright?
I'm pretty sure it was.
Right.
I've got a lot of time for Phil Cornwall. Brilliant.
Who funnily enough, now he's doing. There's a program about which you wouldn't watch because you're far too highfalutin and intellectual.
I'm lowfalutin. My flute is very low.
Spending all your time flicking between BBC Two and BBC Four. But meanwhile, I'm on Pick or some other tawdry little satellite channel.
Some footnote to the EPG.
Watching a program called Aircraft Breakers.
Is it as much fun as it sounds?
Oh, it's awesome. Where they this is where like aircraft. It's a place in Wales, an old Air Force base. It's an active airfield in Wales where they send aircraft to be cut up. You know, when a 737 is no longer in service, they fly it in there and it never flies out again. They sell the engines for like $5 million each, and all this. It is quite
the
interesting.
Indian Air Force.
But who's the voiceover?
Lewis Mcleod? No.
Phil
Cornwall. Sorry,
Yeah.
I forgot where we started out with that long sentence.
Couldn't believe it.
You do know we've only got a few minutes left. I am impressed that you spotted that. And he pops up on YouTube, but I'm not sure how recent the Phil Cornwall material is there. But anyway, I just want him to be busy, or as busy as he wants to be. He deserves to be in work, particularly at this difficult time.
Yeah, awesome.
Now, we haven't really touched on the New Romantics, and we need to do a little payoff of briefly at the end of social media. But New Romantics, how was that for you, that third of the show?
I loved it. I mean, and again, it was I'd watched a documentary about the New Romantics, so I knew all about Steve Strange and his club.
So that's true in Wales. So it's got Welsh roots.
It was the way David Quantick said. New Romantic, of course, was invented by the Welsh. Or actually, a Welshman.
Maybe not all of them.
Steve Strange, and this idea. There was we went off to a sketch then where Steve Strange is on the door and somebody wants to come in, and he said, "Oh, you can't come in. You're not looking weird enough, are you?" He said, "You're not dressed strangely enough," and. He says, you throw everybody out though. He said, I know. He said, last night, he said, there was only me and the DJ. He said, and I threw him out because he was wearing normal trousers.
And they were from Chigwell and they wanted him to know that.
Exactly.
They're very proud of coming from Chigwell.
What about you, New Romantics? Did you like the cut of the New Romantic jib?
Well, I think... I don't know, it just set my teeth on edge. Maybe it's because I've got more time for the Rolling Stones and reggae in real life, in quotes, than New Romantics. But I'm probably suppressing my own love for them at the time, which I've now refashioned, in the way that you reinvent yourself and try and Tipex certain parts of your history as in too embarrassing for words. I did like it at the time. I've got a horrible memory now. Now we're on to PTSD type flashbacks. I'm not sure I should confess to this, but I had a very fancy collared No, it wasn't even a collar. It was a sort of bow tie. In place of a collar, it was a white shirt, but it was a new romantic shirt.
It's all cool.
Thank God. I don't think there's any photos of this. Please, can they be burned and suppressed? And what is it? You can have your history forgotten from Google, can't you? I think I'll airbrush that bit out of my history.
As David Quantick says, new romantic music was played by a lot of big girls' blouses wearing small girls' blouses.
Yeah, I think I was wearing a small girl's blouse. Guilty as charged. We probably haven't done the reggae enough justice by comparison. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on?
No. I mean, this part it was as weird. I mean, the reggae section was as weird as the life of Lee Scratch Perry, isn't it? Really, I suppose he did it quite a justice. I would have thought there.
Yeah,
he's a big fan of David Quantick. Is a big fan of reggae. I've heard him go on about dancehall and all the rest of it previously. So yeah, I think. I kind of like that though. Like his own likes, tastes, and prejudices come out in this, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's a very autobiographical piece of work, isn't it? Don't you think, in a way?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So, or in the fancy term that you'd imagine I would get from BBC4, it's an authored work.
Is it that time?
I think it is.
Holt, who goes first?
Well, we're in a new format. It's a new dispensation. Who knows? There are no rules now.
We should do like rock, paper, scissors and go 1, 2, 3 and then share take your score.
I hadn't even thought about mine, so I need slightly longer.
Okay.
Can you go first if you've decided?
Yeah, 4. Your turn?
Oh, blimey. That's a bit quick. Somewhere between 3 and 3.5. There's a shock.
Really, that's low.
3.25. Are we allowed quarters now?
Why so low?
That's not so low.
I think that's quite.
There's this from the guy who's always giving 2 out of 5. I don't normally do that.
Only some things that you pick.
It's your favourite TV station. You pick.
You pick. Yeah.
Actually, I never read out my my limerick. What I wrote.
Can we do it next week?
It won't apply to next week.
Anyway,
I'm going to do it anyway.
Why did you write a limerick?
I don't know. It's we were bouncing around ideas. I thought, like a fool, you'd write one too, because we mentioned this in the week. Obviously, yeah, your first thing you said when we hooked up this evening was, by the way, I haven't written a limerick.
No, what it
was.
was.
With your Irish roots.
You went, the showing. You said, we could write a limerick, and I went, yeah, all right.
Oh, right. Well, so I was meant to read into your downbeat tone that you had no intention whatsoever. Anyway, I'm going to finish this if it kills me. There once was a writer called Quantick who wrote all his gags with a toothpick. He flossed all his teeth, citing Stones, Mick and Keith, and getting up to all kinds of antics. It could be worse. It could be better. Okay, that's not going to last, is it, that feature?
Not unless we get a job like a tumbleweeds, it won't, no.
Can I pass on that one? Anyway, I'm going to go for 3.5.
You said that before.
No, I said 3 or 3.5.
Oh, 3 or 3.5. I'd already put you down as a 3.5 anyway, so.
Oh, right, okay. Well, that's what I am.
7.5 out of 10 for the Blagger's Guide. Normally, I put where you can get hold of these things in the description, but I am so sorry. I have tried all week to try and find somewhere that you can get it, and it doesn't appear to be on the face of the earth. You can come round my house and listen to it if you want. That's the best.
I think you should put your address up. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. It's your turn.
I am going to go. Actually, I mean, this was a link. This week's was a link via Chris Morris and Brass Eye, sort of, wasn't it? And I'm going to go with the Lewis Mcleod link. I ain't going to lie. It is the Dead Ringers thing. It is the Dead Ringers. I can't give you a reference number because I haven't got it in front of me. But the one that went out as we speak this evening, just go to BBC Sounds and hear the one that went out on the 17th of July as well.
Okay, that's it for another edition of, I nearly said the Blagger's Guide then because I forgot what I was working on. That's it for another edition.
Are you kidding?
Of the Comedy Slab podcast. It only remains for me to go. So now I've done that, I feel a lot more relaxed. I did want to say...
That's a cover of Prince's When Doves Cry, wasn't it?
that was the 12-inch mix. What I was going to say was, I think you like to do the social media and all that sort of stuff. If you've listened to other episodes, and you think, oh, I know what they should do, or I'd like the way they do this, or maybe we should do that, please feel free to suggest via social media. And you can get in touch in the following ways.
At Comedy Slab on Twitter, and likewise at Comedy Slab, our Facebook page. If you could like the latter and follow us on the previous. And don't forget, #SaveLiveComedy. I may be speaking for myself rather than on behalf of the joint Slab venture. And
I normally say, like, we're available on Spreaker and Stitcher and iHeartRadio. We're massive on Spotify, aren't we?
Yeah, don't underplay it. It's a very important platform to us. I meant to urge people to recommend us in person or even over Zoom, whatever. I don't know. What is the way? Oh, yes, I'm going to appear on a podcast. I'm very excited. I'm a contributor to a podcast about famous cousin Ron, a.k.a. Ronald Lacey, who played the Nazi, wait for it, in Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Awesome. That'd be when's will you tell us nearer the day when that's out, and we can?
I will send a link, and I will put it on obviously at Comedy Slab on Twitter. But it's recording as we speak in the next day or two.
Love it. All right. So we'll catch you. I'm just going to be sitting around practicing my Mick Jagger impression and going, "Here, Adrian, you see the sell-by on these marshmallows."